Hello and welcome to episode 4 of District 4 Lab's interview series, Profiles in OSINT. Today I'm joined by a very special guest, Shanti Salas. Shanti is the most recent hire at District 4 and I'm really excited to get to know him better. Shanti, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Well, pleasure to have you. So I want to get a little bit into your background before we get into more about the industries that you've been a part of. But could you tell us a little bit about the journey you've taken to get to where you are now?
Sure. Well, once upon a time, I was a private investigator for Kroll, Business Intelligence and Investigations. That's really where I got my career started in Miami, and it was a great place to do that type of work, especially anti-fraud work, because Miami is really kind of known for that, right? Lots of fraud, lots of money laundering, but and a lot of that was driven by just the sheer amount of capital flight coming from Latin America, really at the time, and landing in Miami. So a lot of good investigations could happen. I spent some years there, spent some time at PwC, really standing up their corporate intelligence group. And then I went from there to Exeger, and a company that a lot of investigators know, Open Corporates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, quite the journey too. And is investigations and compliance something you sort of always saw yourself going into, or what started to excite you about it that made you stick around?
I've always liked investigations. I've always liked a field of work where you can really put, natural inquisitiveness to work, right? And I've always thought of myself as somebody with a good sense of inquisitiveness and a curiosity, to answer questions and really understand who is who and what really happened, right? There's often some layers that need to be peeled back, and that is a process. That's an art, and it's one that is fun. People who last in this field, there's a bit of a thrill to this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. End up solving the goal at the end too. Okay, you've been in the industry for a little while now. How have you seen investigations and compliance or open source intelligence as a whole change in that time? Yeah,
so I have been somebody who has really straddled the work of investigations as well as compliance and really within compliance due diligence, reputational due diligence. When I started, I would say that the field was not as differentiated as it is today. And in some sense, that was good because somebody could learn by doing, on one hand, reactive investigations, and then in one day, and then the other day, doing due diligence work, more database-driven work, kind of what we would consider more online open source intelligence. And when I started, I was literally doing database searches, one day, and then taking photos in the field another day behind a tree or from a car, right? So it gave me sort of a good breadth of experience that I could leverage later on in my career. And I think over time, things became much more technology and data driven. I've always considered myself a little bit of a tech and data geek. I like that. And, fortunately, my career has allowed me to lean into that.
And with so much change throughout the years as well, is there anything you'd like to tell yourself when you were, just starting out in the industry that you'd wish you had known back then?
Yeah, I often have told myself, and I wonder, should I have pursued a law degree earlier on? That's one thing. But obviously staying abreast of the latest with technology is just incredibly important. I would probably double down on that if I were to tell myself, 20 years ago, where my career would take me. It's double down on data and technology.
Have you found it at all difficult to keep up with the changes? Does it ever seem too hectic, or is there ever something that it's a very steep learning curve?
Oh, of course, definitely. One has to pick and choose battles in everything, and I think after a while, one has to be comfortable with the fact that there's certain things that we will never know, or only know to a certain amount of depth. But that's okay, right? Every professional has to go through, that, and ultimately, they have to become comfortable with it and know, okay. I'll specialize here, and with some of other topics and areas, I'll try to know enough to be dangerous, as they say.
Yeah, and that's what teams are for anyways.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, and then, what future changes do you see coming down the line? What sort of trends have you seen a lot of emphasis on lately?
Well, what I will say is, and one of the reasons why I'm here with you guys is at District 4 Labs, is that the usefulness of breached and compromised records and data is only increasing. Obviously, the amount of data is just growing exponentially all the time, but the use cases and where this gets applied and where we are accustomed to applying them. Historically, people have been using breach data for various investigations, threat intelligence work for years. I would say, historically, it's been more siloed in the cyber realm, quote unquote, right? And I think that it's been, fortunately in recent years, breaking out of that. There's still some work to do where this type of data, breach data, becomes a fundamental tool really across the board, across various types of investigations. I really can't think of a type of investigation where this cannot be applied. It's that crucial of a tool.
Yeah, it goes from a piece of the puzzle to the missing piece of the puzzle.
Absolutely. Breach data is something that should be in every investigator's toolkit. Whether it's, an anti-money laundering investigation, sort of classic threat intelligence, looking at, somebody that is, or a threat actor that's harassing somebody, it's clearly a piece of the puzzle. Right down to the sort of anti-fraud investigations of all colors.
We've definitely noticed recently as well that folks are starting to warm up more to the concept of using breach data in investigations in different use cases. There was a lot of hesitation, especially regarding the legality of using breach data, accessing it, even storing it. How much of that have you seen in your interactions, and what do you see to be the trends about people starting to embrace it a bit more? Do you think there's much reasoning for it?
Well, I think there was some great Department of Justice guidance that came out in 2020. I think it was early 2020 from the cyber unit in DOJ that really outlined, the correct way to gather and use breach data from open sources, right? So there is a use case there, and it can be done in a legally compliant way. I would also add that anybody that has used this or, has attempted to use it, once they get a taste of it, they will find it useful, right? Not saying that it would crack every case, but it will lead to more cases being cracked via new, interesting leads that were previously invisible.
And what excited you in particular about potentially, and now obviously in reality, taking a role with District 4?
Yeah, a few things. One, I would say the breadth of breached data, compromised data, and even just sort of hard to find public records. The breadth is incredible with what District 4 has done. The quality of indexing and parsing, and putting this all into a very clean and crisp user interface that's highly intuitive. All of that is fantastic. But I would also say the fact that this data has been collected by District 4 for over a decade, that is fundamental. And it's fundamental for the value of the product, because even though all of this is at its heart open source data, one has to know where to look for it and when to look for it, because we all know open source data, open source leaked data sets, they don't stay in the same place, right? They don't necessarily stay online, right? So, they may appear one day and disappear the next. So you have to be able to grab them and incorporate them into a larger data lake. And that's exactly what District 4 has done, and I find that extremely valuable. Some call that a data moat, but there's a very, very strong data moat here. It would be very difficult to create something like this product from scratch starting today, right? Given the fact that, at least as we're recording this, there are well in excess of 25,000 distinct data sets that have been incorporated into District 4 Labs product, Darkside. Just terabytes and terabytes of data.
Shanti, again, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you better, and excited for you to join the team.
Stoked to be here.
And with that, we'll conclude episode 4 of our interview series, Profiles in OSINT. Thank you very much for joining us.